Hello friends, my name is Ash. This channel is more usually focused on the fun of costuming and live action roleplay. And this is one of a series of essays I'm releasing in honour of Pride Month, talking about issues that are important to me in relation to gender, clothing, and the costuming community. This is going to be heavier than my usual content, so if you prefer a more light-hearted video, I can recommend the one popping up in the cards now. Over the past few years, as I've started taking a more active role in trans activism and education, and I'll be honest, a big part of that for me has been learning, because it's not like being trans comes with a handbook. I've had to radically change how I interact with people in the community in general, and I've ended up leaving a lot of groups in that time. Fundamentally, those two things have been for the same reason, which is that people love to call themselves allies, but not only do they not do the work of being an ally, and quite often are like slightly transphobic themselves. Not maliciously, just the general background transphobia that pretty much everyone gets baked into their life. They're convinced that they are already the perfect ally, so not only do they not need to change anything, they can speak on behalf of the trans community. Oh god, also ableism. Like, rampant ableism. As someone who is neurodivergent but not disabled, it's not really my place to get on a soapbox here, but I do feel the need to point out that when you berate and abuse people for not being able to think of something immediately, or getting their sources muddled in a fast-paced conversation, or not responding instantaneously to emotionally charged messages, not only are you not being a shining social justice warrior winning social justice points for beating people in debate, your neurodivergent friends notice. And this is the tip of the iceberg of ableism. I don't expect people who have been wronged to be polite. I do expect them not to actively perpetuate structural inequality. Didn't realise that was a high bar. I can put up with a lack of education and a lack of inclusion purely as a result of ignorance and the kind of run-of-the-mill microaggressions that happen in a group, so long as the group is open to change and improving itself. And a lot of the groups I've been a part of seem to be more focused on congratulating themselves on how inclusive and socially conscious they were, and how many people they called out, and how many people they expelled for not meeting their standards, which, if I'm having to explain that not everybody makes dresses to some of your membership, you have serious work to do within your space before you start coming for people outside of it. Or it's the age-old, why would you bring politics into our lovely hobby space? We just want to sew. I don't think I need to elaborate a lot on why that second one is bullshit, but it keeps happening, so... In summary, if you are going to declare that my existence is political, or my personal favourite, inappropriate for children, you are making a political decision by choosing to exclude me, even implicitly. There is a huge difference between we have minors in this group, so these subjects are off limits in conversation, as they would be in a film for this age group, although no online group I have ever been in was set up to appropriately safeguard minors, but that's a whole other kettle of fish we're not getting into right now. Stop asking teenagers where they live. There's a huge difference between that, or we're not discussing the general election on this forum because it's international, and Discord doesn't handle asynchronous conversation at all, and it's going to get heated. But if you want to form a separate group chat, we're cool with it. And to use a completely random set of examples, please don't tell people you're trans, this is a no politics space. Well, I guess I'll try and use those pronouns, but I'm old and it's hard. It's not appropriate for you to talk about your past experience as other genders. We have minors in this community. Okay, but what are you really? Both these attitudes also feed into why I've become far more reserved when it comes to individual members of the historical costume community. Nobody in particular, just people in general. Because for a long time, I was having those first conversations with people, usually cis women, and they never went well. The basic trajectory of every single one of those conversations went something like this. This person gets called out, usually for something pretty minor, often very gently, not always, but sometimes what people refer to as a call-out is some poor trans person being incredibly polite about why this hurts. That person usually, not always, but usually jumps straight to, a trans person needs to come and tell me what I'm doing wrong. And so there I am going, okay, this person has apparently only just encountered the concept of inclusive language and has no pre-reading, has made no effort to educate themselves. We are going to square one and the basic building blocks of what makes a trans inclusive space. And I come in with stuff prepared and talking points and examples, and whoever it is, again, this has been multiple people, I would hazard more than 5, possibly more than 10, just speaking to me personally. This person is like, no, I know how to be an ally. I just need you to tell me what the correct answer to this specific question, or how I should handle this very specific instance. I'm not here to think about broad changes in my worldview. Sometimes with a side order of how bad it made them feel that people think they're not inclusive. I am not the most diplomatic person in the world, and I am not good at conversation with strangers. That's why I have a YouTube channel and not a podcast. And when I don't feel like I can speak honestly, the conversation would just dead end almost before it even began. I cannot be expected to break down your personal barriers as well as educate you from scratch. And as such, I just stopped talking to cis people about trans issues. Unless you've done your homework and are demonstrating an open willingness to learn, to embrace the complex, multifaceted and incomplete nature of trans discourse, to consider the whole breadth of your actions and impact instead of just trying to figure out how to get people to stop yelling at you in this specific instance, I'm not wasting my time anymore. Because I can tell when you don't actually think of me as a whole equal person, and I can tell when you don't actually care. If you're cis, one thing you can do right now is to amplify trans voices rather than use your own. A cis person using their social media to go, "Transphobes suck! We support trans rights in this house," whenever some new legislation kicks off or someone high profile makes a comment, is always a bit cringy, because I'm like, could you not find an actual trans person to share instead? Do you not follow any trans people? Because whatever issue has just occurred, there are for sure trans people speaking out on it. And if I know trans people on social media, having a variety of nuanced and complex responses. I would much rather people made at least an effort to engage with the complexities of situations and with trans people's honest feelings, which sometimes is going to be ugly feelings like anger and grief. And you paint over all of that and hide us even further when you just go, "Yeah, transphobes can get stuffed. Unfollow me if you don't agree." Well, second thing you can do as a cis person, delete all the explicitly transphobic comments on your social media. Report transphobic comments when you see them on other people's social media. I don't fully understand the obsession with debating people in your comment section like you're going to win points for your cutting takedown or everyone needs to see how clever and witty you are. But even if that's your jam, debating transphobes in public just reinforces the idea that this is a debate. My existence and my entitlement to human rights is not debatable. If it's neutral enough that you feel you can make a difference by quoting hard fact or linking to good trans educators, do that. If it's just nasty, get rid of it. And get rid of that account for good measure. Shut these people down and give them nowhere to go. Okay, no, if you're cis, there's 3 things you can do right now, and the third is to give absolutely no money to JK Rowling ever under any circumstances. That includes not going to Wizarding World. Don't pirate her work and the associated properties, because that reinforces the narrative that horrible trans people are ruining her stuff for all the true fans. Don't use your social media to promote or celebrate Harry Potter stuff, and be conscientious if engaging in fan works. I've seen a lot of people who are like, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because we're reclaiming Harry Potter for the fans, and firstly, every time I see Harry Potter anything, it makes me bone-achingly sad. So I will just unfollow you, and you need to think hard about whether you really want to create a space where some trans people don't feel able to stay. Secondly, if you're not trans, you have nothing to reclaim. As bad as you might feel about the whole thing, it wasn't taken away from you the way it was violently taken away from many trans people. Not everyone, not even many trans people, are going to agree with me on that one. It's very much a personal opinion, not the word of trans God. God is trans, but there's no official single trans opinion. If you are trans and choosing to reclaim Harry Potter stuff, I respect that, even though I still kind of wish you weren't. And I really don't want to watch. Trans issues are messy and complicated, compounded by the diversity of the trans community, which is why not trying to engage with actual trans voices is so harmful. There's also probably other massive transphobes I'm not as aware of, but I'm British and trans masculine, and I've had one of the keystones of my very unhappy teenage years irrevocably ruined. So she's at the top of the list for me. One final thing I want to touch on in the context of sharing and amplifying trans voices on social media is that I think a lot of people have a level of anxiety over either receiving hate or being the reason someone else receives hate. Here's the thing, I'm openly trans on all my social media. That was not a choice. Having a social media presence, YouTube, Instagram, because of how I look, because of what pronouns I use, having a YouTube channel for me went hand in hand with being a trans person on the internet. Because I did not see any way I could hide that I was trans while being that public facing. Like, I could try, but it would have destroyed me. Having to lie about who I was to such an extent. The idea that I'm not ready for what the consequences of that is, or that you can somehow protect me by not amplifying my voice, is really patronizing. Receiving hate isn't okay. If you're a trans person on the internet, I am never going to tell you that you just need to toughen up and deal with it. It hurts, and it should not be happening. Use every resource at your disposal to shut it down. Delete, block, hide use from channel. If it's high-profile people, call them out and hold them accountable. Trans people, especially trans people who are public-facing, are going to need support and care. But what they don't need is unasked for shielding and cis people deciding what they can and cannot deal with. That is not respectful. And here's where we get a bit weird and sweeping because we're into theoretical territory. I genuinely believe that love is infinite and hate is finite. I really do believe that transphobes, real, hardcore, frothing at the mouth transphobes, right now are a small minority. The problem is that they're very loud and very confident and very privileged and have no reason to keep quiet. So there's a lot of people who don't have a strong opinion, who don't have any trans friends, who don't know of any trans people in any detail, and probably have some ingrained, mildly transphobic views, as many of us do as we live in a society. They're hearing a lot of very loud, very confident people who seem to have all the facts, and they're not hearing anyone challenging those views. And bit by bit, they're drifting to the right. Because a lot of trans people, and we're already a really small group of people, okay? The exact estimate keeps changing, but it's single digits percentage of the population. It might even be as low as 0.5%. It's not, but it might be. Are keeping their heads down and trying not to attract attention, or are being discredited for other reasons. Race, political views, religion, immigration status, age. Like, just take a moment to think about the sheer vitriol these prominent white middle-class adults are directing towards literal children who don't remotely have the skill set to deal with that hate. I don't blame anyone who decides to keep their head down. For many years, I did too. But now I'm definitely closer to middle age than I am my teenage years. I have 20 years of existing on the largely unmoderated internet. I have a good support network who affirm and celebrate me, and I don't give a fuck about what strangers on the internet think anymore. I'm ready, let's go. Not everyone, but a lot of openly trans people on the internet have made that exact same internal calculation and concluded, you know what, I can take this. Bring it. And I've broadly reconciled myself to dealing with a certain amount of hate because deep down, I truly believe that there's a finite number of people writing that hate with a finite number of hours in the day, and every person writing, "You will never be a woman." Seriously, guys, don't get me started, I cannot. On one of my YouTube videos is using up 20 seconds out of that finite amount of time, and maybe they don't get to do the same to the young trans woman who's just started her channel and would find that remark far more hurtful than I do, who doesn't have the support to shrug off the ones that do hurt. The more trans people stepping up, hard as it is, and God knows the last thing I want to do is pressure people to come out, but please be aware that for a lot of trans people, our choices are deeply constrained to either speaking out or being silenced. It means that the transphobes get spread thinner and thinner, and the more cis people who've heard a trans person talk, who watch their videos, follow their content, who know the facts, and who can question the transphobes' poisonous rhetoric. Now I'll level with you. I'm terrified that this isn't how the world works at all. I'm terrified that the well of hatred people have for other human beings is bottomless and will drown all of us. But I have to keep acting like the narrative of hope and eventual triumph is the true one, because you have to fight for the reality you want, and the alternative, even on a purely personal level, is deeply, deeply dark. In the past, I've had people ask before sharing my stuff on their Instagram or whatever, and that's cool. A heads up before your stuff goes in front of the eyes of 100,000 people is, you know, fine. But I think a lot of people assume that trans people on the internet don't want more attention because that leads to more hate. If someone is positioning themselves as an educator or someone who speaks out on trans issues, of which I am the least, don't worry. We've already made that calculation. Amplify our voices. One less positive aspect of this, of course, is when cis people are holding back because they're concerned about that hate being directed towards themselves. And this is where I end up in a horrible catch-22, because nobody should be receiving hate. I can't blame anyone for wanting to avoid it. I'm deeply conscious of the harm transphobia causes, even when it's directed towards cis people. Yes, people make transphobic comments to cis people too. Same rules apply, delete and block the bastards. It's not okay because you're cis, and it's still transphobia when it's not directed at a trans person. And yes, forget, every person who doesn't choose to step up to do the work of being an ally, not claiming allyship, not making empty statements, but actively learning, sharing, supporting, speaking out, and engaging with the ongoing practice of being an ally to the trans community, is one more person complicit in the silence that allows transphobic voices to spread. And that's horrible. That is a terrible thing to say about other members of your community. I know for a fact that I don't do enough with regards to other aspects of activism and inclusion, so I have no moral high ground from which to speak. I don't even feel I do enough for the trans community. And we are all broken and tired and overworked. But while it's ugly, it's also true. I can't make people step up. I don't want to shame them for not doing so. The short version is, it kind of sucks. I totally get why you don't want to do it. I also don't want to pressure people to do more. Everyone has reasons, often very good reasons, why they haven't done more, and there's always more to do. There's never going to be a gold award that shows up and says, yes, you have done enough activism on your chosen specialist subject. The work increases proportional to the number of people doing it. But if you're listening to this and reflecting on your own privilege, and let's be honest, you're watching a YouTube channel on the internet about the hobbies of historical costume and LARP, there's a lot of privilege right there already. If you're thinking, I've realised I'm not doing as good at this as I thought, I think I could do a little more. By God, we need you. Someone once said to me, if you can, you must. And while I mentally tell that person to fuck off on an almost daily basis, often because I've realised that actually I cannot, and it should be okay to say I cannot, but that still holds a level of shame that I'm trying to teach myself I don't need to carry. In this instance, I'm here, and I can, and I am. If you'd like to show your support for the channel and the series, liking the video and subscribing to the channel is always welcomed. In the description box, you'll find a link to my Ko-fi, where you can make a financial contribution to support me and the channel. Dream big, and I'll see you next time.